Senate, a quorum call?
We're not in a quorum call.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, yesterday afternoon, my Democrat colleagues, and when I say my Democrat colleagues, I mean all of my Democrat colleagues, with one exception, chose to block legislation to sanction individuals at the International Criminal Court who participate in investigations or prosecutions of American or Israeli citizens. In the wake of the vote, a number of my Democrat colleagues put out a statement expressing their concern at the ICC's decision to issue arrest warrants for Israeli leaders. I suppose it's nice that they're concerned, Mr. President. They should be concerned. But it would be even nicer if they had done something about it. It's hard for me to fathom how Democrats could vote against this common-sense measure. In fact, they wouldn't even vote to have a debate. I'm not sure if they're afraid of antagonizing the anti-Israel wing of their party or if they're simply too beholden to big tech, which lodged some tenuous concerns about this legislation. But whatever their reason, Democrats chose to vote no. No to standing up for our ally Israel. And even worse, no to standing up for our own citizens. Apparently, the America Last playbook is alive and well in the Democrat Party. Mr. President, Republicans tried to the very end to accommodate Democrats in hopes of finally getting this legislation over the finish line, nearly 8 months after the Republican-controlled House first passed the bill. But Democrats kept moving the goalposts, and Republicans were not going to just gut the legislation to get Democrat votes. If Democrats decide that they want to take real action to address the targeting of our allies and prevent future targeting of American citizens, Republicans are here. Till then, we'll continue to do what we can without Democrats to defend our allies and our nation. Mr. President, over the last 4 years, the Biden administration set our energy security on a dangerous path. Administration policies created serious uncertainty for energy producers. The administration sharply restricted oil and gas development. New government regulations threatened to close existing power plants even as our electric grid struggled to keep up with demand. The President attempted to force the widespread adoption of electric cars again, despite the incredible strain that would place on our already shaky power grid. And the list goes on. Mr. President, a recent report from the North American Electric Reliability Corporation warns of, and I quote, mounting resource adequacy challenges, end quote, in the next decade. One reason is the retirement of conventional energy generators in some areas because, or I should say in some cases, because of regulation. Another is increased demand, like increasing demand for electricity being driven by artificial intelligence data centers. It takes roughly 10 times as much electricity to run a ChatGPT query as it takes to run a Google search. Think about that. Imagine the energy demands of AI at scale. Anyone who thinks we can be on the leading edge of new technology with less or less reliable energy should think again. We need more energy. And the good news is we have it. In fact, we have the resources to be energy dominant. But we need to start saying yes to American energy. Mr. President, on his first day in office, President Trump took the first steps toward restoring American energy dominance. He declared a national energy emergency, which will allow him to cut through some of the red tape that stifles energy production as we continue to work toward broader regulatory relief. He also reversed the Biden administration's pause on new exports of liquefied natural gas, a decision that threatened American jobs and left our allies looking elsewhere for their energy. President Trump also reopened parts of Alaska to energy development that the Biden administration had previously closed off. He spared the American people from the Biden electric vehicle mandate, and he put the brakes on spending from the Democrats' so-called Inflation Reduction Act, in reality a climate bill whose actual cost has skyrocketed since it passed. Mr. President, energy is an asset, and producing our own energy means we don't have to rely on other nations for a critical resource, including countries that don't share our values. Energy dominance is a deterrent to our adversaries, and it's literally the engine of our economy. But if we want to restore our energy dominance, we have to start saying yes to American energy. Yes to an all-of-the-above energy strategy that includes everything from oil and gas to hydropower and biofuels. Everything. We need all of it. Mr. President, I've come to the floor many times to discuss the negative effects of burdensome regulations. And for the last 4 years, the EPA has put forward some of the Biden administration's most harmful regulations. There was the WOTUS rule that would have been a disaster for farmers and ranchers. The Good Neighbor rule that would have shuttered power plants in several of our states. The Clean Power Plan 2.0, which would have jeopardized our future energy security. Overly strict emission rules for vehicles that would have forced Americans into electric vehicles that they don't want, and in most cases can't afford. Costly standards for medium and heavy-duty trucks that would have harmed small trucking operations. The list, Mr. President, goes on. Regulations like these, drawn up in Washington, D.C., have real-world impacts. And I'm pleased that President Trump is committed to giving Americans relief from excessive regulations and that his EPA nominee will help him implement that vision. Lee Zeldin, whose nomination we will vote on later today, is a former 4-term congressman representing a district almost completely surrounded by water. He understands the stakes of environmental protection. His record in Congress speaks to this. But Mr. Zeldin also recognizes that the EPA can't be a hammer in search of nails, and that EPA rules have to be balanced with the needs of our economy, our national security, and the American people. He also understands the importance of collaboration with stakeholders, something that was too often lacking in the Biden administration. I know farmers and ranchers in my state would have appreciated a seat at the table before the Biden administration resurrected the harmful WOTUS rule. And I'm pleased that Mr. Zeldin is focused on bringing a collaborative approach to the EPA. Mr. President, I'm also grateful that Mr. Zeldin committed to timely release of the renewable volume obligations as is required by the Renewable Fuel Standard. In years past, the Biden EPA has been late in releasing its renewable volume obligations, which were often below industry production levels, creating instability for producers. Biofuels are an important asset in America's energy portfolio. So I'm pleased that Mr. Zeldin will ensure that biofuel producers have the certainty that has been lacking in recent years. And I'm encouraged that Mr. Zeldin is willing to work with Congress on President Trump's promise of year-round E-15 sales. Restoring energy dominance will require an all-of-the-above approach. It will require a smarter approach from regulators, and I look forward to working with Mr. Zeldin in carrying out this important work. Mr. President, I yield the floor.